So today I'm going to be going over why I decided to sell out of my Snapchat position. So we can see on the left hand side I have the Robinhood app open. Now recently I decided to try to exit some of the positions that I held, and I wanted to make sure I was holding companies that I believed in the long-term future. So before I jump into the actual reasons as to why I sold my position, I just want to go over the price that I initially bought the share at and the price that I sold at. So we can see I still have 10 shares in the company. That's just for a little bit of fun, but previously I had around 120 shares in the company, and we can see that the average cost is $18.15. Now looking at the price of Snapchat over the past few years, we can see that this stock has really not performed that well overall. In fact, it's mainly gone down, and it's only since early 2019 that the price started to reach existing all-time highs. Now, in the last month or so, this price has increased. So we can see back in April 2020, we had a price range from $11 to $12, and now we are all the way up to $20.85. Now, that's not to say that the price will go up higher. In fact, at the time of this recording, market hours indicated that the stock was up to the $21 mark. But for me personally, it was a good time to sell out. So I'm just going to scroll down and look at the history section, and we can see that I made 2 orders. And so the first time I sold was 67 shares, and the price was $20.39. And then the second time, price was slightly higher, so with less shares, 40 shares, with a price at $20.67. So all in all, over the last couple of years that I've held Snapchat, I only made around the $250 mark, and that's not very impressive at all, but I was happy just to exit the trade with a profit, and I can allocate those resources to other companies. Now, for those that follow me on the Trading 212 platform, where I mainly focus on dividend-based investing, you'll notice that today I haven't sold, but in terms of selling stock, the longer you hold a given stock, you're going to be aware of previous price points. And so I had opportunities in the past to sell the stock at around $26, or one of the highest prices it was in the early days. But I held off, and when it comes to selling a stock, which inevitably we have to do, even if we are focusing on dividend-based investing. So for instance, if a dividend is cut and we want to buy into other companies, or we're unhappy with the underlying company that we invested in, then we are free to sell out of our positions. So just be aware that it's a little bit of a mental hurdle to try and wait for a price to gain traction and reach a price point that you previously wanted to sell out. But as long as you can allocate those funds to another company which can generate more money in the future, then if you make a lower level of profit or you even make a loss, then that's something you can factor in, knowing that in the future you have a greater chance of making more cash. Okay, so moving on to why I decided to sell out of Snapchat. So I have Yahoo Finance open at the moment. We can see the price of Snapchat after market hours. So scrolling down to some of the graph areas on the right hand side here, so we can see that the revenue looked pretty good. So year after year we had this upward trend, which is positive. Now, what we need to keep in mind is that Snapchat is a growth-based company. Within the technology sector, it's generally fine for the first, say, 10 years or so to report losses. And as you grow bigger and bigger, you want to see a reduction in the loss. And on top of that, you can forecast when the company will be profitable year on year. And an indicator of that is by looking at the earnings. So the blue line's down here, and we can see that 2016 they reported $500,000 in terms of their earnings, and it gets worse from 2017. Now, 2017 was when Snapchat actually IPO'd, so some of the real figures come to light. And so these numbers are extremely big indeed, 3.45 billion. And then looking at 2018, we have almost 200% reduction, but still at a 1.26 billion loss. And 2019, again, they reported yet another loss of just over 1 billion. While some of these numbers look quite quite scary from a business perspective. Generally what happens is a company is happy to burn through quite a lot of money with the goal that customer growth is increasing. And why is customer growth important? That's because Snapchat's business model relies for the most part on ad revenue from within their application. So now looking at the earnings, we can see the circle without any color in the center is price predicted, and then the solid icon is the actual earning report. So keep in mind all these prices on the y-axis here are negative up until the horizontal line here. And so taking Q2 of 2019, for instance, there was an expectation of an earnings per share of minus 10 cents, but the actual was minus 6 cents per share. And the same could be said for Q3 and Q4 of 2019. Now, Q1 of 2020, the estimate was negative 7 pence per share, but the actual value was negative 8 pence for each earning per share. Now it's interesting to see that in Q4 of 2019, for the first time, the company reported a positive value. And we have to understand some more context. So within 2020, it was mentioned that they'll be spending more on their infrastructure. So they were aware that more capital would be spent on infrastructure improvements. We can see that all this information was reported for the analysts to try and predict what Q1 value would be, and they weren't far off in terms of their estimate. So again, these negative numbers were not the sole reason why I felt the need to sell out of my own positions in Snapchat. So from these graphs, I suspect Snapchat will be profitable in the future, assuming that they follow the same trend and they're on the same trajectory that they're on right now. But for me, I just wanted to look at some of the fundamentals of the company. So for the last 3 years, Snapchat has been a publicly trading company. The company started back in 2011, so we'll ignore 2011 to 2017, but 2017 to present day, I really wanted to see more within the company. So for the last couple of years, Snapchat has been focusing on the rebuild of their Android app. So Snapchat decided to go in a different direction when it came to their Android app initially. And so they were focusing on features that were not liked by the public. They had a redesign of how the app was used by customers. And so a lot of time was wasted on unnecessary changes to the UX design. But they got there eventually. They now have an Android app, which is now working well for Android users, but I had a few question marks on the developer side of the company, given that Snapchat just focuses for the most part on their iOS and their Android application. That is one of the biggest areas of the company. So they really needed to have sped up the process faster than they did. Most companies have an iOS and an Android app on launch and they are able to iterate and improve, but having to build from the ground up was of course important for the company, but it took away focus on other areas for Snapchat. And so from an investor's point of view, it makes it look as though the company is very sluggish in their approach and within their actions, at least from my perspective anyway. And then when we look at what else Snapchat is focusing on, well, all they have is spectacles, which is a form of eyewear that pretty much allows you to interact with a virtual lens and take what is argued to be a 3D image. And so spectacles has been going on for the last 3 years. They're on version number 3. The CEO doesn't believe that there will be mass adoption for their eyewear until around 10 years from now. So we can see that spectacles sold around 150,000 units at the time of this report. And they highlighted that in the case of iPod, back in 2002, their first year of sales was 143,000. So of course they are completely different periods in time. Snapchat has decided to focus on iPod, which did well back in 2002, but I don't think this is the greatest of comparisons. And as we know, iPod itself, Apple killed that version of their product suite because they integrated all the iPod features within their iPhones, for instance. Now, when we just think about the product of spectacles itself, we have the likes of Apple, which potentially in 2021 or at the latest 2022, they're going to be releasing their Apple Glass product. And looking at some of the designs, it looks a lot nicer than the product that Snapchat offers at the moment. So while I hope that Snapchat can improve year on year with the tech that they build, I struggle to see Snapchat's product within the mass market before that of Apple. Now, being first to market is not always ideal. If we think back to Google Glass, which discontinued their product in 2015, I think we can somewhat understand why Snapchat has not been trying to sell their spectacles to the mass market without really making sure they have a solid product. But when you have the likes of Apple and with their tech coming around the corner, I think it leaves Snapchat pretty vulnerable. And so the decisions I made to sell out was on the basis on their progression and the types of products that they have. Now, with the current stock price trading at around 11 to 12 times higher than realistically what the company is earning year on year, it definitely worries me that the price can drop back to those lower single-digit figures like we saw a year or so ago. Now, I honestly feel as though Snapchat does have a future ahead, but when I think of similar-based companies, I generally look towards that of Twitter. Their share price is generally from low $20 to mid $40, and in the long term, that is probably the best that Snapchat can reach. In the short term, that price can push up just from individuals buying more shares or from the likes of other platforms issuing out free shares within the company. But Snapchat does have a younger audience, which hopefully they can hold on to those individuals and continue to grow that way. Maybe I'm just getting too old, but let me know in the comment section below whether you plan on buying or selling Snapchat shares. Thanks for watching, everyone, and with that said, I will catch you in the next one.